Hey everyone, Jeff Manchester, Manchester Music. Welcome. This video is in response to a comment that I got from someone about how I set up my samples so that they are triggered and played within either Native Instruments' contact architecture or Play or UVI, whatever sort of plays back my samples when I go to compose my cues. I think this is an under-discussed topic. I'm really happy I got the question, and I'm happy to talk about my setup. Especially because I just overhauled it completely. I went out and I replaced a lot of the machinery with which I use to sort of contain my samples and have them play back and everything. So it's a great topic. But I want to qualify that everything I'm saying here is like based on my own experience and very limited knowledge of computers. I know a lot about audio, but I don't know a lot about how, stuff buses internally on a Mac Pro versus an hard disk drive or an SSD or whatever. I have a limited knowledge and understanding of those things, so some people might be kind of scratching their heads if they know a lot more than me when it comes to computers. I'm just going to explain what I use, how I use it, and how I understand it, and why I do what I do, and we'll sort of go from there. So I want to start off by just going over to my screen here and showing you my system specs. A lot of people have asked what sort of RAM am I using, how does it work, blah, blah, blah. So let's just go to About Mac. You can see that I'm running El Capitan, which is, I think, one sort of OS behind where we are now in the evolution of Apple's systems, operating systems. Okay, so on the Mac HD, which is basically where everything, that's the brain of my computer. I have a Mac Pro Tower, the trash can one. So that has about 80 gigs free of 500 gigs, and that's, I believe, it's a flash drive. It's not a fusion drive, although it might be a fusion drive. I'm not really sure, but it's important for you guys, for the sake of speed and just sort of overall system health, to be leaving at least 100 gigs free on that. This is something I was told by an Apple employee and actually a few other people too. So if you find that you're running into a situation where you've got only a sliver of available storage left on your sort of main hard drive, you should offload anything that, maybe is just music or something not integral like an application. Offload that to an external hard drive or something elsewhere. You want to be keeping the sort of home base hard drive free so that it can be sort of nimble when it's running programs and opening up and closing system-wide. So when you reboot, shut down, all that stuff. The next thing I have is my new beast, which is where I had all of my actual old stuff. It's sort of a misnomer now, and we can see that I have 1.26 terabytes free of that, and that's a 3 terabyte drive. So I still have a lot of audio and stuff on there, a lot of sample libraries, which I use every now and then, but that's mostly my backup now. So when I'm working in Pro Tools, I just make a copy, I drag a copy of whatever I'm working, it backs up to the new beast. Now, the latest sort of addition to this family is my sample library SSD. SSD stands for solid state drive. And I'm going to get into more about the SSD in a moment here, but I've got 2 terabytes free out of 4 terabytes, and I am using my latest purchase. It was a Samsung, I think, 850 EVO 4 terabyte SSD. So let me just explain my sort of story as to how this came about. So I used to have everything on, like I said earlier, the new beast, which is a hard disk drive. So I recently purchased another HDD, and I had it here. It was 4 terabytes, and it was much cheaper than the SSD, but it made so much noise. It was so problematic, and I'm very sensitive to noise, extremely sensitive to noise. I'm like Martin Scorsese, if you've ever heard about this guy. If anyone's like tapping their toe on set, or like, I don't know, anything, like jiggling change in their pocket, like he goes berserk. That's kind of how I am. I don't want to be distracted. I don't want to hear clicking and pops. I don't want to go, wait, where's that coming from? Everyone shut up. Where's that coming from? Like anyway, very sensitive to sound. So I had to return it, and I decided to make the investment into an SSD. Why do you want an SSD over an HDD, hard disk drive? An SSD, solid state drive is what it's called, has very few, if any, moving parts. Think of the architecture inside of a USB stick. When you plug a USB stick into your computer, you don't hear it whirling and buzzing, unless there's something wrong, but even then, they're silent little, components. The same thing is true of an SSD. It's extremely quiet. The flash technology within it enables read and write speeds that are very, very, very quick. In fact, they've just upped the game with SSDs. Samsung, I think they now have the Samsung 960, which is a PCIe card. So you need a PCIe input, a slot, in order to make it work. In this case, I don't have that. The Mac Pros, the old cheese grater Mac Pros had them, but the new ones don't, so I didn't see any use for that. It's more of a PC, Windows machine sort of thing, you know, a big tower with a PCIe slot. Mac sort of went out of that system. So getting back to sample libraries and all this stuff, I made the investment into an SSD that is 4 terabytes, and you can Google that to find out how much money I paid for it, in Canada to boot. They're not cheap, but I thought it was worth it. And if we go into my Finder here, I'll show you all of the sample libraries I have loaded into this SSD. And as I showed you a moment ago in the About section here, I've still got around 2 terabytes free, so I can still bring in more sample libraries. So I've got everything here. I can rank it by, so we start with the Array Marimba, and we go all the way down to the Woodwind Sonokinetic library. So there's a lot of stuff in here. Now, should you guys be getting an SSD? Should you guys be getting a 4 terabyte SSD? I don't know. If you are just using Complete, which is more than enough for a lot of people, some would say more than enough for everyone because of the capabilities in that sort of system, then I think that thing caps out at like 400 gigs or something. So maybe a 1 terabyte regular drive, if you're not anal about noise like I am, is all you need. But I bought an SSD because I find that it can find the samples really quickly, load them into the RAM in Contact faster than my hard disk drive could. Even the one that I bought, which was, I believe, 72 revolutions per minute, write and read time, I think, or something like that. No, the write and read times were independent from the revolutions per minute, but still, it was much, much faster. And I'll give you an example. So I'm going to go into Complete for a moment here. I just have some top secret isotope stuff on my desktop, so I don't want to go there. I don't want to show you guys anything there. So here we go. So Berlin Brass. I mean, this is a 300 gig library, I think, without the additions. It's currently it's got additions loaded in here. But I think muted brass, yeah, additional instruments and muted brass. Let's just go to the main collection here, and I'm going to load a patch that I've never loaded before, just so you can see how quickly it loads into Contact. This is the full version of Contact, obviously. I've already done a batch resave, which is really important for you guys too. I did a video on that really quickly. A batch resave just basically creates a one-to-one line when it's searching for the sample, so that it's not looking through the entire Spotlight. It's not indexing your entire computer to find it, that sample library every time. It knows directly where to find it, and then once it finds it, it'll remember that forever. So it just creates a sort of a memory of where those samples are on whatever drive you have them, so you're not spending time loading the library. That's much quicker. Now, loading the samples into Contact is another matter, so I'll show you now. Let's go to muted brass. I want to go for the multi-articulations, and let's see one that I've never used before. So I'm on an SSD, remember, Samsung Evo 850. I'll bring in the Harman Stem half multi. Let's see how long this takes first to find the samples and then to load them in. You'll see a little bar that fills with RAM. It doesn't fill with RAM, but it fills with gigs, which I think it's loading into the system RAM. So, found them. We're done. That's it. That was really fast. Mind you, that's a pretty light number, 11438 megabits. So let's go for something a little bit more sizable here. Let's see if... I don't think I've loaded... Let's just horn 2 stop multi. It's going to find the library on the SSD, and then it's going to load the samples. Found them. There we go. That's a little better. So it loaded around 380 megs of samples into the memory, into the system memory that fast. Now, here's where SSDs are really great. So it took a couple seconds, remember, to bring that memory in. I'll close this, and I'll drag it in once more and see how fast that is once the samples have been committed to system memory. Watch how fast this loads. Done. And I can start playing. Whatever. Let's try another one. I recently reinstalled all these libraries, so we shouldn't be getting any trickery in speed. This should be It should take a long time because I haven't used them since I changed everything from the hard disk drive to the SSD. So let's bring in another sort of heavyweight library, Metropolis Arc 2. I'm going to go into the Core and Harps. So that's pretty fast, 271.48 megabits. And if I get rid of this, watch how fast that 271 loads again. No, I don't want to change anything. Poof, we're done. Let's see if I can find one that's like 2 gigs or something like that. Or no, probably not 2 gigs, but close to a gig. Let's see, Horn Ensemble Multi. This should be a good example of how quickly things can load. This should be almost a gig worth of samples. So again, it's going to find things. That goes pretty fast. Done. There we go. Look at how big this one is. So that's a lot. And that's a little bit of time, but we're on a really fast SSD. That's 1.9 gigs it's putting into the memory of just the, this one sort of articulation patch. So now I'm ready to play. 1% of my CPU. It's super light. Mind you, I'm using this outside of a DAW, so it's not taking into account all the sort of other operational CPU happening. Let's say if I had this open in Logic or Cubase, but still. Now I'll close this and let's see how fast this loads now that it's been committed to the system memory. Nope. Horn Ensemble Multi. Super fast. And obviously, if we're using these samples all the time and if we're composing cues all the time, these patches will come really quickly because you're using them a lot. They'll have been committed to system memory and they'll load really quickly. In fact, let's do a test right now. So I'm going to close Contact and I'm just going to remember it's 5 Horn Ensemble Multi out of Berlin Brass. And again, I have to be careful that you guys don't see stuff on my machine. So let's see if I can find this without compromising anything. I might just flip the screen to something else so you don't see stuff. Okay. Done. And now I'm going to go back into Berlin Brass and Horn Ensemble Multi. It's going to find the samples and hopefully load them really quick once it's been committed to memory here. Pretty fast, pretty good. Anyway, so that's my setup. I have all of my main sample libraries on a solid state drive from Samsung. It's super expensive, but for me, this is worth it. I know I'm going to be getting more sample libraries in the future. I love how quiet they are. I don't have the old one to show you just all the clicking and popping that it was doing. It almost seemed like it was malfunctioning. It was so darn loud. This is my setup. This is what I use. I might as well go back and show you the rest of my stuff. So I'm using, here, storage, that you can see everything. I showed you that a moment ago. Memory, we're using 64 gigs of RAM, and I got that from Otherworld Computing, but that was a little while ago. And my Mac Tower is, it's refurbished. So sometimes those come with their own little unique problems. Every Mac, like every PC, is a little snowflake, and they're all surprising and frustrating in interesting ways. But hopefully this gives you a better understanding of what you might need in your setup. Just to sum up here, I don't think you need to go to an SSD. The prices are falling every couple of months as technology advances, but I think if you can find a super efficient 7200 revolutions per minute hard drive that's maybe Thunderbolt or Firewire. I mean, my SSD, it's USB 3, which some would argue is like an inferior sort of transfer speed. That means that's the sort of connection, that's the sort of plumbing between the SSD and my computer. It's USB 3. I'm not sure what the transfer speeds are on that. I'm sorry, again, I'm not a big computer guy, but some would argue that that's like not really optimal for me, but I'm fine with it. If you can get a great Thunderbolt hard disk drive at 500 gigs or at 1 terabyte or 2 terabytes for a really good price, and it's a super quiet hard drive and it fits your needs and all that stuff, awesome. For me, I'm just at a point in my life now where I can kind of afford it, and I can't really afford it, but I want to make the investment and I want something that's fast and super quiet. So that's kind of what I went for. So anyway, hopefully that helps in your quest to build your own libraries and build your own sort of huge, baffling compendiums of sample libraries and samples and all that stuff. Thanks very much for watching, and yeah, take care.